We talk a lot about red flags in dating, but they're not the only kind of flags that matter when you're building something. So I want to talk about green flags, the things that are actually signaling positives, emotional maturity, genuine connection, long-term potential. So open and honest communication is probably the most foundational, right? Hey, I feel X when you do Y. That is so important to be able to have those conversations and for your partner to listen. Obviously it's not about dumping your feelings, but really having someone who's willing to hear you and vice versa without having to walk on eggshells or worry about them exploding. Emotional expressiveness is deeply tied to emotional intimacy, right? And it's a huge part of long-term success. Mutual respect and kindness, just being kind to each other, may sound a little bit obvious, but people sometimes get into relationships where you can just see that they resent each other, right? And so when you're in a relationship where you can feel genuine warmth, then that is a huge green flag. Kindness, even in conflict, especially in conflict, that's a huge green flag. Also, shared values and goals is a huge green flag in relationships. Chemistry is important, sex is important to most people, right? But values around your family, your lifestyle, your sex life, your boundaries, your religion, all of those things really, really matter. Opposites, the idea that opposites attract, I think, can be a little bit, because often that can be very exciting in terms of chemistry, but when you build a life together and now you're paying bills together, running a household, maybe raising a family, that's where the opposites thing can be a big problem. So if you share those main values, that's really, really, really important, and it's a huge green flag. Emotional support. If you feel like you can cry without being told to chill, or you're so emotional, you're so sensitive, if they ask follow-up questions, they ask you questions about your day instead of changing the subject, green flag, right? That's secure emotional availability. That's what you would call it in therapy. And it's a big predictor of your long-term relationship satisfaction and also independence. It's a green flag. A healthy dynamic isn't just two people glued together. It's two whole human beings who choose each other, who choose to go through life together. You want, when you each want the other person to have their own life and friends and hobbies, and they're not threatened by that. That's huge. When you can go out on a girls' night, they can go out on a boys' night, and it's all good. That is a major, major, major green flag. So, whether it's physical, emotional, honoring boundaries, shared values, respect for consent, those are so important. So if you're in a relationship where you have those things, those are major, major signs that your relationship has what it takes to go the distance. If your partner's willing to go to therapy, for example, if you guys are reaching road bumps, that's a green flag. Even if you're having problems, if they are willing, without having to be absolutely dragged there, if they are willing to do that work, then that's a really, really great sign. And then, of course, there's just this intangible thing, which is when you're with them, do you feel energized, positive, or do you feel anxious? Do you feel small? Your nervous system is often way ahead of your brain or your heart. So really tune into what your nervous system is telling you about the relationship that you're in. Okay? So if it feels calm and safe, that's very, very telling. Green flags aren't always loud. They're not as flashy as red flags are. So, they don't make your heart race because of chaos. But that's actually, healthy love feels calm, right? So just because it feels easy, don't blow that off. That's peace. That's safety. That's sustainable. So let's try to get turned on by emotional security. If you can do that, you've got it made. What do you think are your green flags in a relationship?